Hey there, folks. Let me tell you a wild story that happened to me. I was feeling pretty darn happy because I got off work early. I'd been expecting to be stuck on the night shift, but luck was on my side, and I was out of there by 11 p.m. I was grinning ear to ear and had a spring in my step as I drove home, excited to surprise my wife, Lila. I pictured her face lighting up when she saw me, and I couldn't wait to relax with her after a long day. Lila thought I wouldn't be back till morning, so I rushed home with a little something special. I picked up a bottle of wine and a bunch of flowers. As I pulled into the driveway, a weird feeling came over me. Lila's car wasn't in the garage, and the house was dark and quiet. At first, I thought maybe she had gone out for a late-night snack or something. But as I stepped inside, the silence was kinda creepy. No lights, no sign of Lila anywhere. Where could she be? I asked myself, pulling out my phone. I called Lila, my fingers tapping impatiently on the counter as I waited for her to answer. Finally, she picked up. "Hey, Lila, where are you?" "I got off work early," I said, my voice still filled with excitement. There was a long pause before she replied, her voice sounding flat and almost annoyed. "I'm not coming home tonight, Caleb." My heart sank. "What do you mean you're not coming home?" I asked, confused. Should I repeat myself? Lila snapped, her irritation clear in her voice. "You didn't understand the first time, Caleb." My heart started pounding. "Lila, what's going on? Why aren't you coming home?" I asked, my voice rising with frustration. "I've got some urgent work to take care of," she replied coldly. "Just don't bother me, okay? I'll be back tomorrow." I stood there, the phone pressed to my ear, feeling my stomach churn with unease. Something was definitely wrong. Lila had never acted this way before, so cold and dismissive. My initial confusion gave way to anger as I listened to her disinterested tone. "Lila, this is ridiculous. Why are you being so disrespectful?" I yelled, my hand gripping the phone tighter. "We'll talk about this when you get home," she replied, but the line had already gone dead. I sat at the kitchen table, my jaw clenched, waiting for Lila to come home. I heard her car pulling into the driveway, and my heart pounded. The door clicked open, and she stepped in, looking like nothing had happened. "Morning," she said casually, her voice cool as she walked past me, heading straight for the stairs. "I'm going to take a shower." My chest tightened with frustration. She wasn't even going to offer an explanation, not a word. The tension between us hung thick in the air, and as much as I wanted to confront her right then and there, I decided to hold off. I waited until I heard the water running upstairs, then, driven by a gut instinct I couldn't ignore, I headed outside to check her car. Something wasn't adding up, and I wasn't the kind of man who would sit around chewing on uncertainty. The car was still warm from her drive. I slipped inside, and my eyes immediately landed on the tablet she always used for navigation. My fingers shook slightly as I tapped through the recent destinations. One address stood out. She had spent the night on the other side of the city, parked outside a house in a quiet neighborhood, 251 Oakwood Drive. I stared at the screen, my heart thumping heavily in my chest. Why would she have been there all night? Before I could let my mind race too far, I popped open the glove compartment, not sure what I was even looking for. But what I found stopped me cold. An open box of condoms, missing just one. My mind reeled. We hadn't used condoms in years. There was no reason for this to be in her car. My hands felt numb as I closed the compartment. My stomach churned, and I felt a wave of betrayal wash over me. The dots were connecting in the worst possible way. I knew what Lila had been doing. I walked back into the house, the shower still running upstairs. I sat at the kitchen table again, staring blankly at the floor, waiting for her to finish. The minutes dragged by, but the moment she stepped out of the bathroom, I was ready. Lila came down the stairs, her wet hair wrapped in a towel, her face fresh and unconcerned. She glanced at me, but my hard stare stopped her in her tracks. "What?" she asked, her tone already defensive. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low but firm. Lila rolled her eyes. "About what now?" she asked. "About where you were last night," I said, my gaze unflinching as I watched her, waiting for her reaction. I had her car keys in my hand. Lila's face darkened. "What the hell, Caleb? You were going through my car, my stuff? Answer the question, she snapped. Whose house is 251 Oakwood Drive? Why were you there all night? I shot back, my frustration bubbling to the surface. Lila's eyes flickered with something, guilt or defiance. I couldn't quite tell, but she straightened her posture, crossing her arms. It's Michael's house, she said flatly. Michael, the guy from your office? I asked, my heart sinking. Yeah, I stayed the night there, she replied, her voice calm, almost too calm. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my temper in check. You think I'm an idiot, Lila? You spend the night at another man's house. I find condoms in your car, and you want me to believe nothing happened? Lila's eyes narrowed. So what if I stayed there? It's not what you think. Then what the hell is it? I demanded, my voice rising with anger. Tell me, is he your lover? Lila exhaled slowly, her defensive tone softening. No, Caleb. Michael's not my lover. I glared at her, my patience wearing thin. Then why were you at his house? And don't tell me some ridiculous lie. I deserve the truth. Lila finally dropped her arms, the irritation on her face shifting to something colder. Look, I had some problems at work, okay? Michael helped me out. He covered for me in front of our bosses. If he hadn't, I might have lost my job. I went over there to thank him. Thank him? I asked, my eyes burning with disbelief. So what? You slept with him out of gratitude? Lila's expression remained unchanged. It was my idea, Caleb. Michael didn't ask for it. I knew he found me attractive, and I decided to give him something for helping me out. My blood ran cold. You gave him something? You mean you? He stopped struggling to find the words. You slept with him as some kind of reward? Lila's calmness was infuriating. Yes, she said simply. It wasn't cheating, Caleb. It was just a transaction, a voluntary, honest deal. No feelings involved. I stared at her, utterly stunned, my mind racing with disbelief. How absurd and cold this all sounded. You sold yourself for your career? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Lila looked at me without flinching. I gave him a little happiness in return for helping me. That's all, she replied, her tone as if she were discussing a minor inconvenience. My heart ached as the reality of her words sank in. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Lila, how could you even think that was okay? She shrugged, a casual gesture that sent my heart plummeting. It was a professional courtesy. He did me a favor. I did him one. That's it. It felt as if my world was collapsing. Before I could muster a response, I stared at Lila, trying to process the absurdity of her logic. She didn't flinch, didn't show a trace of remorse. Lila, I continued, my voice thick with disbelief, I don't think we should dwell on this. You may be upset by what you've learned, but you're my wife, and I love you. One night, one mistake, shouldn't be the reason for a divorce or for ruining what we have. She responded as if she were smoothing over a minor inconvenience, her demeanor utterly unfazed. Let's just forget about it, Lila said, her tone breezy, as if suggesting we overlook an unpaid bill. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My mouth felt dry, and my throat tightened with the weight of what she had done. As I sat there in stunned silence, Lila's gaze drifted toward the bouquet of flowers sitting on the counter, the ones I had picked up yesterday to surprise her after my early return from work. A smile spread across her face. Wow, honey, are these flowers for me? She asked, admiring the vibrant petals as if nothing was wrong. You're so good to me, she said, not even waiting for an answer. Instead, she turned to the bottle of wine I had brought home, popping it open with ease. She grabbed 2 glasses from the cabinet and poured them both a drink, acting as if everything was normal, as if she hadn't just admitted to cheating on me for some twisted version of career advancement. Lila handed me a glass, then raised her own in a casual toast. Caleb, I'm sorry. Maybe I acted stupidly, but let's just forget about it and move on. Her tone was light, almost playful, as she took a sip of her wine, watching me over the rim of the glass. I sat frozen, my mind spinning. I looked at her, trying to comprehend how easily she brushed everything aside, as if her charm could erase the betrayal. The calmness with which she manipulated the situation made my blood boil. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even pretending to be. This wasn't a mistake to her. It was just business as usual. Without a word, I drained my glass of wine and stood up. Lila gave me a curious look, but I couldn't stay in that room any longer. The air felt suffocating, thick with her lies. I needed to clear my head. Stepping outside, I inhaled deeply, the cool morning air biting at my skin. I paced across the porch, running a hand through my hair, my mind racing. Lila's betrayal cut deep, but what stung even more was how little she seemed to care. She expected me to shrug it off like it was nothing, to keep playing the part of the loving husband while she acted as if her actions had no consequences. But I knew better now. This wasn't a one-time slip. Lila's coldness, her calculated demeanor, made it clear that what she'd done wasn't a mistake at all. It was a deliberate, selfish choice. Lila thought she could walk all over me, make me the fool. If she wanted to play games, I would play along for now, but on my terms. The more I thought about it, the clearer my plan became. If her job meant so much to her that she would betray her marriage for it, then it was the perfect place to strike. But first, I needed an alibi, something airtight that would put me far from home, far from suspicion. Taking a deep breath, I headed back inside, mentally shifting gears. Lila, I called as I walked into the kitchen where she was sipping her wine. She looked up, her face softening as she noticed the change in my tone. "I've been thinking," I began, sitting back down across from her. "Maybe you're right. We've been through a lot together, and one mistake shouldn't tear us apart." Her face lit up slightly, her smile returning. "I knew you'd see reason, Caleb. We're stronger than this." I nodded, pushing down the resentment bubbling inside me. "Let's move on. I don't want to lose what we've built." Lila reached across the table and took my hand, giving me a warm look as if everything had fallen neatly back into place. But I was already thinking ahead. She was playing right into my hands. The next morning, I went to work, determined to make the next move. I headed straight to my boss's office, knocking on the door and stepping inside. When John, my manager, waved me in, I said, "John, I need a favor. I'd like to request a business trip to our production site in the next city. I think it's time for an inspection." John leaned back, clearly surprised. "A business trip now? You don't usually ask for that." I shrugged, trying to appear casual. "Yeah, I've been under a lot of stress lately. Plus, it's been a while since anyone went out there." John nodded, considering it. "All right, I'll get the paperwork sorted today. You'll have everything you need by the end of the week." "Thanks, John. I really appreciate it." Later that day, I received all the official documents for the trip, signed papers, company authorization, everything to make my absence completely legitimate. When I returned home that evening, I casually handed Lila the papers. "Looks like I've got a business trip lined up," I said. "I'll be gone for a week, starting Monday." Lila glanced at the papers, her eyes scanning them before she handed them back. "A week, huh? Well, I guess I'll miss you. But work is work, right?" "Exactly," I replied, keeping my tone even. "Just part of the job." Lila smiled, completely unaware. She believed me, and that was exactly what I wanted. Here's a more concise version of the text, adjusted to fit the 600 to 700 word requirement. As the days unfolded, I meticulously set my plan into motion, ensuring my alibi was rock solid. With that secure, I focused on gathering the right allies to help orchestrate my revenge against Lila. After some searching, I stumbled upon a group of energetic young event planners who specialized in organizing flash mobs and creative public pranks. Their reputation for unforgettable stunts caught my attention, and my proposal intrigued them. I arranged to meet this group at a quaint cafe known for its warm ambience and delectable pastries. Upon entering, the comforting scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the sweetness of baked goods. This inviting atmosphere provided a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. Sitting at a small table, I laid out my vision for a carefully crafted scene, designed to leave Lila bewildered, confused, and utterly humiliated. I insisted on maintaining an air of elegance. I wanted this to be a gentle yet devastating nudge rather than a harsh blow. "Okay, so you want us to stage a performance?" one organizer inquired, eyebrows raised in skepticism. I nodded solemnly. Exactly. I need something that will make her question her reality, something unexpected. It must feel personal, like her true self is being revealed, yet in a way that leaves her doubting everything she knows about herself. The group exchanged glances, a spark igniting among them as ideas began to flow. We can definitely pull that off, one of them said, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. If you want her to feel the heat, we've got you covered. On Monday morning, I left for my business trip, every document meticulously prepared. As I departed, Lila saw me off, blissfully unaware that the facade of normalcy was merely a cover for the chaos I was orchestrating. The next morning unfolded like any other for Lila. She ventured to her favorite cafe near her office for her usual coffee and croissant. Just as she reached for her cup, a man in a sharp business suit approached her. He glanced in her direction, feigning sincerity. "Oh, it's you," he exclaimed. "You're the woman who thanks her coworkers in, unusual ways. So generous of you." Lila froze, the man's words hitting her like a slap across the face. "Excuse me," she stammered. He chuckled, his expression serious yet tinged with unsettling amusement. "It's really admirable, you know? Not many people would be that selfless at work." With that, he turned on his heel and walked away, leaving Lila stunned. She remained silent for a moment, trying to process what had just transpired. Shaking off the encounter, she grabbed her coffee and exited the cafe, her mind spinning but determined to move on. The following day, Lila returned to the cafe, the strange encounter still echoing in her mind. As she approached the counter, an elderly gentleman shuffled up beside her, his eyes lighting up with recognition. "Oh, my dear," he exclaimed, admiration filling his voice. "I've heard about your generosity. Truly inspiring." Lila's face drained of color. "What are you talking about?" she managed to whisper. The elderly man waved his hand dismissively. "Word spreads quickly about people like you. So selfless, so accommodating in the workplace. Quite the tale." He smiled one last time before turning away, leaving Lila reeling. Her hands trembled as she picked up her coffee, her mind racing. This wasn't mere coincidence. Twice now, strangers had approached her with insinuating remarks. But how did they know about her? She left the cafe in a daze, paranoia settling heavily in her chest. As she walked to her office, her thoughts drifted back to that night with Caleb. No one else knew about it. No one except him. Could he be behind this? When she found Caleb in his office, she leaned in close and hissed, "Did you tell anyone about that night?" Caleb looked up, confusion on his face. "What do you mean?" Lila's eyes narrowed. "Did you open your mouth and tell anyone?" Caleb's face paled as he grasped her accusation. "No, of course not. I wouldn't risk everything over this." Lila scrutinized his face, searching for deceit, but saw only confusion. Her anger simmered as she backed away. If Caleb wasn't spreading rumors, then who was? She left his office, her thoughts spiraling. The strange encounters and comments from strangers didn't make sense. She felt a cold shiver of dread. Was she losing her mind? Was someone playing an elaborate game with her? That evening, Lila sat in her dimly lit living room, a glass of wine gripped tightly in her shaking hands. Breathing heavily, she grabbed her phone and opened the browser. Her fingers hovered over the screen for a moment before she typed in a search, "Psychotherapists near me." As a list of names appeared, she stared blankly at it, the realization dawning on her. She needed help. This was no longer just about revenge or humiliation. It was about finding herself again. Lila felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her, but amidst the chaos, she knew she had to take the first step toward regaining control of her life. It was time to confront her fears and figure out who was really pulling the strings in this twisted game. By Friday morning, Lila's nerves were frayed from the bizarre events of the past few days. Determined to avoid any more awkward situations, she skipped her usual coffee stop and headed straight to the office, hoping work would help her regain control. As her coworkers began trickling in, Lila was already typing away. For the first time in days, she felt a strange calm settle over her. However, that peace was short-lived. An hour later, A courier walked in with a massive bouquet of red roses and announced, "Delivery for Lila." Lila's stomach twisted in knots as curious colleagues gathered around. "I didn't order anything," she said, trying to stay calm. The courier shrugged and read the card aloud. "For the sexiest and most divine Lila, who made me happy that magical night. Signed, Caleb." Lila's face flushed with humiliation as laughter erupted around her. In a fit of anger, she knocked the bouquet from the courier's hands, sending roses scattering. "What is this?" she screamed. "What kind of disgusting joke is this?" Some co-workers looked shocked, while others continued to laugh. "Calm down, Lila," one said, smirking. But to Lila, it felt like a nightmare, especially since Caleb was absent, sent to another office by their boss. Just then, Mr. Harris, her boss, emerged from his office, confusion etched on his face. He surveyed the chaos, Lila screaming, flowers on the floor, and the courier backing away. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Lila's heart raced as he picked up the card. "Lila, what have you done? Is Caleb involved? You know company policy." "No," she shouted, desperation creeping into her voice. "This is a setup." Mr. Harris's brow furrowed. "You're not making sense. If Caleb's involved, I need to know. You're risking your career." Lila felt trapped. "Someone is trying to ruin me," she cried, but her voice wavered. "Calm down," he said, trying to maintain his patience. "We'll sort this out. You and Caleb can take a lie detector test if necessary." But Lila couldn't listen. The world spun around her, and with a desperate cry, she turned and ran from the office, her heels clicking on the floor. She needed to escape. Bursting outside, the cold autumn air hit her face, briefly snapping her back to reality. But the relief was fleeting. The weight of everything pressed down on her. Lila didn't stop until she reached a park near her apartment. She collapsed onto a bench, tears streaming down her face. She felt utterly lost, her reputation, her job, her sanity slipping away. As the sun set, casting long shadows, Lila sat alone and defeated, wondering if she would ever recover from this devastation. Lila sat on the park bench, overwhelmed by confusion and despair. She had lost everything, her reputation, her job, and now, it felt like her sanity, all because of one mistake. As the sun set, casting long shadows, she felt utterly defeated, wondering if she could ever recover. The cold autumn air bit at her, but she was numb, wishing to disappear. Finally, she stood up, trembling, and walked slowly toward her apartment. Hesitating at the door, she took a deep breath and entered the dark, silent hallway, hoping Caleb might be there. But he wasn't. In the living room, everything felt ordinary yet alien. She poured a glass of wine, but its bitter taste matched her mood. Hours passed as she replayed the week's events, reflecting on her priorities and the mistake that had ruined her life. Was it too late for hope? With renewed determination, Lila opened her laptop and began typing a heartfelt email to Caleb, apologizing and expressing her regret. After hitting send, she felt a wave of peace wash over her. It was the first step toward redemption. Exhausted but hopeful, Lila closed her laptop and went to bed, ready to fight for Caleb's forgiveness and rebuild her life.